after the Pledge of Allegiance for a moment of silence for the tragic tragedies at Michigan State University yesterday.
Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Beagle,
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Present.
Councilmember Behrman,
Present.
Councilmember Gotchel, Councilmember Brenlin Fox is excused, Councilmember Sharp,
Present.
Councilmember Smiley,
Here.
quorum present.
Thank you. Changes or additions to the agenda tonight as presented. City Manager?
I have no changes, sir.
Any from the dais? Seeing none, we'll move to the first order of business. Is the approval of minutes. We've got one set of corrected minutes up here for the regular city council. One set of corrected minutes up here for the regular city council meeting of January 24th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Do we have any other corrections besides the ones that were presented tonight? Seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the revised regular city council meetings of January 24th, 2023. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no correspondence tonight, which moves us to the first call to the public. The rules to the call to the public are as follows. The public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included in business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of the council present. All persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reason for addressing the council. And all comments by the public shall be made directly to the council. Do we have anybody for the first call to the public? Seeing none, I'll close first call to the public and move on to the city manager's reports. We have two tonight. The first one's the fire monthly report of December 2022. Any questions? All right, the second one is the police monthly report of December 2022. Any questions? Very good. Moves us on to the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the items will be removed from the consent agenda and added to the regular agenda at the end of unfinished or new business. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Support.
I got a motion and a support to approve the consent agenda as presented tonight. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moves us to unfinished business. We have one item of unfinished business tonight, and that's the consideration of the Charter Amendment Committee recommendations to direct city administration to develop language for proposed charter amendments for the 2023 election cycle as determined during the course of city council discussion. Motion?
Support.
Councilmember Gotchel?
Thank you. So tonight you'll see there were 4 things that we need to discuss from the Charter Amendment Committee. These were the outcomes of our meetings for the last year, as well as the discussions we've had on council and the kind of priorities list that some of you shared with the committee as well before our last meeting. So boiled down for the November 2023 election, we are proposing that the pronouns usage throughout the charter be amended to make all of the pronouns more plural and inclusive rather than just using the masculine pronouns in the current language. 2 parts to section 411E. Part 1, and we wanted to separate these for discussion, but if everyone agrees that the changes should be made to the charter, then since it's the same subsection, we can just make one ballot question. But part 1 was addressing the appointee to council term length. Right now, run into that post-November election gap with a few people, and it just creates some awkwardness where we have a vacancy. So we wanted to address that and move the timeline for that seat vacating to coincide with the January 1 date that all the other elected seats do. Part 2 was to formalize a process for appointing individuals to council through an application interview process similar to other cities. And then the third item that we were proposing was amend section 611B, which talks about the fee basis payments. That started because we used to have an in-house city attorney and city assessor, and the language says we can't pay on a fee basis. Now that we have outside vendors handling those city officer positions, we thought it should be changed. The city attorney also recommended changing that to clean up protocol because we might be in violation of the charter as things stand now. So those were the three things. I'd be happy to answer any questions as well, but I think a lot of us have gone over this in previous discussions and whatnot. There were a few things for possible future cycles. One that was mentioned a few times was the charter millage cap. That I did confirm with our finance director that the current up to millage that we renewed expires at year end next year. So we could put that on any ballot next year and give ourselves some time to study it before then and come up with the real number, if there is a real number, and then just housekeeping in future years. That's all I've got.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor Resnick?
So with the special millage expiring at the end of '24, with the potential then for just one general election, is that correct? To put a ballot question on then, before the expiration of it? Possibly a primary, depending on how things go with
We'll have the presidential primary in March,
March.
or February. It's going to be in February. And then the August primary, and then the presidential in November.
So there would be three potential dates.
Right.
Okay, I guess I'm comfortable with that. And I was concerned that there was only one. And again, the whole thing with the charter cap being raised is the education piece of it, right? Public. I think a lot of times in the past we tried it, it was assumed to be a tax increase. Well, it's not a tax increase. It's just making the charter coincident with the current times, right? If it hasn't been changed since, what was it, 1987 or whatever, then I think it's time to do it. But if we have 3 election cycles to attempt it, I'm comfortable with it.
Councilmember Behrman?
Thank you. Maybe this question is better for Councilmember Couch, but the 4 issues that we've proposed to go forward, I know I was in favor of 2 of them, but not for 2 of them. So what were, was it just we took a consensus, or it's just how did we get to these 4 particular items?
The ones that not everyone shared a priorities list with us, but we reviewed all the ones that were shared and kind of made a tally of which ones came up multiple times across the lists, as well as looking at the pressing items, which is like the 611E. Yeah, 611B, sorry. That is one that just needs to be cleared up, even though it is a top priority for everybody.
I completely agree that 611B should go forward, and I also think that we really should be with the times and adjust our pronouns and our to be inclusive. I just can't get behind the changes to particularly the 411E Part 2. So I don't know if, for simplicity purposes, you'd be fine with us dividing the question for us to vote on these individually, or
That was the intention. That's why there's Part 1 and Part 2, to discuss them separately, vote on them. And kind of how we thought it would work this evening is that we would vote on each of these separately, just so because we're essentially directing the city administration to craft ballot proposal language, so we should be treating them individually. The only thing is, depending on the vote for Part 1 and Part 2, if they pass together from council, then that's just really one ballot question, not 2. If one passes but not the other, then it's still one ballot question, but the city administration knows that not to include whichever part didn't pass.
And then just for informational purposes, is it just a simple majority to direct administration to draft, or is there a higher percentage required to amend our charter?
Should be simple majority.
Okay, that's what I was kind of thinking. Okay, so I'm in support of the pronoun amendment. I'm in support of 611B. I do believe that both of the changes in 411E are not needed in our charter at this point in time, and my personal opinion of both of those is I'll vote no.
Councilmember Smiley?
Thank you, Mayor Beagle. Just worth adding into, part of that previous question. We reviewed minutes from previous discussions and meetings, to come up with this list. So I'm pretty sure it's representative of what the council, considered a priority to address. That is worth, emphasizing that, these are the items worth addressing. Much like, Councilman Behrman, I'm not certain on what 411E Part 2 would entail. I think it's here. I'm glad it's here as a discussion item. And you can see it's, the idea, formalize the process. And that's an indication that, currently there is no real definitive words in the charter that give the council guidance on how to, fill a vacancy. Now, I've been thinking about this, of course, for the last year, and more so leading up to this meeting. I'm like, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Having the flexibility to, fill the spot, when it comes up, which I wouldn't say is rare, but it's not an every year occurrence. Different councils have different personalities, different mayors have different personalities and how they want to handle things. Regardless, in the end, the council has to approve the person who is going to be positioned up here. So I would like to hear what folks, what council has ideas for how we would quote unquote formalize the process. But I'm not sure that this needs to be done, and of course, depending on what that formalization entails, will affect it quite a bit as well. But the others are, I think, fairly, straightforward, easy. The pronouns is, reading through the charter and everything's he. It's a little awkward, and then. That gap we have for Part 11, Part 1 of 411E, that's just an awkwardness that, would be nice to clean up. None of this is earth-shattering, but it's we put some time into finding what needs to be cleaned up, and, here's that first wave. Let's talk about it.
Councilmember Sharp?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I support directionally all four of these, but I assume really what we're doing tonight is we're going to direct the city to spend money on developing the language. And before it goes on the ballot, we will have an opportunity to, we might say, you know what, we don't like that, let's strike it off, and it doesn't even go on the ballot. All we've done is spend some money on developing some legal words. But I'm kind of looking for a nod of a head. We would not have to put these on the ballot just because we're voting tonight to develop language.
How it's worked in the past is we do a vote like this, the city attorney and city staff work together to put together the ballot language, then we have a formal vote to approve or deny the ballot language going on the ballot.
Go ahead. Councilmember Smiley?
Thank you. I wouldn't want to send any of these to, our law firm to formalize, clean up, make it lawyer speak. If, we're not all in agreement, at least in the spirit of what each of them are. So if, we decide there's one here that, we're not really behind, we're not going to send that off to be, have ballot language created. So, that's all.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I would rather send the ones we want rather than spend time and spend money with the lawyers writing up something, and then when they get done with saying, well, no, we don't want it, so.
Yeah,
But-
I'm
but,
good with voting on all
yeah.
of them separately.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have a separate motion for that, or what the
Yeah,
motion was
it'd
that's
be-
on the floor.
There's no motion on the floor, we're just,
It's just
this
this,
discussion. But as far, I can support 3 of these, but the 411E Part 2, the formalized process to appointing individuals, past mayors and the present mayor, we put people on this council, and I don't think we put a bad person on this council, and mainly for the reasons why there was a vote no for the person. It wasn't a vote against the person itself, it was against the process. And quite frankly, in the charter, there is language that says it's a mayoral appointment. So I really can't support that one. We haven't had a problem with it, and I can't see in the future having a problem with that one. So I can support 3 of the 4 of these, but I can't do all 4. Councilmember Berman, come over here.
The only additional thing I would add to that, if we were to get into a circumstances where we needed to appoint someone quickly, by formalizing a process into our charter, it could hamstring us from moving forward if we have to publish it, we have to do interviews. I too just cannot see putting a formalized process into our charter, especially when we could do that very easily just by council rules if we want to. It doesn't need to go into the charter.
Councilmember Gatchel?
Thank you. Just, I guess, to give some background on discussions within the committee itself, but first, the section in this charter does not say it's a mayoral appointment, and so it says it's by position shall be filled within 60 days by a majority vote of the remaining members of council, and then it goes into they have office until Monday following such election. Nothing in here delineates that the mayor appoints this person, and like the committee members or commission members that we have, and then as council we get to say yes or no. That's not what it says. In terms of the hesitation, I guess, on part 1 from Councilmember Behrman, I would be curious because that we've run into that, like with Councilmember Sharp, where he sits out for 20 minutes of a meeting until we vote him back in. It's frankly idiotic. So I guess I don't understand the hesitation on that one. I'd appreciate that one being discussed a bit more. But for number 2, there were discussions about whether you put this in the charter, or it's been said by city staff that we could put together a procedure and put it into like the council rules and regulations. And it was said that we always vote on every year. We have never voted on those. So it would be, where we came up with the idea of this going to the charter is then you don't have to remember every new council to approve a packet of rules and regulations, because it hasn't been remembered in at least 8 years. So by having it in the charter, it's more set in stone and less difficult to forget since it's there. The other part of it, in terms of having, you had mentioned wanting to fill it quickly. I don't understand what the rush would be. There would still be 6 council members potentially, unless there was a mass resignation, which would cause a whole other issue. But we take time to campaign every summer and fall and spread amongst the voters and residents what our convictions are, what direction we want to see the city go. By having the open application and interview process, we're really giving transparency to the city and voters, because that person that gets appointed did not go and campaign. Voters did not have the opportunity to talk to them on the porch or at concerts or what have you. And that's why, whether it is in the charter or in the mysterious rules and regulations we've never voted on, that is something that I think needs to be addressed one way or the other. To me, it's cleaner to do it in the charter, since then it is there in the charter and not really up for discussion or debate later, or to whoever to remember that, hey, it's a new council on January, first meeting January 2024, we have to vote on rules and regulations again, because history kind of points out that we have the ability to forget that we need to do that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
I'll agree with 411E Part 1 wholeheartedly, because it's been a point of contention for all my years here on council, and that we do that expiration and then have to do a reappointment for the last 4 meetings or whatever. But perhaps there's a compromise here where, it does clearly state that it's by a majority vote of the remaining members of council, and perhaps it is a good way to do it is just put it into the council rules and keep it out of the charter, which would dictate the process, which could be very lengthy, right? Especially if you don't get any applicants for that particular vacancy. So perhaps it is best, that portion of it best kept out of the charter, and find a different way to come up with a process, right? A very detailed process for how we take applications. I mean, right now, for the opening on the DDA, we get an interested party that puts in an application, we look at it, mayor appoints it, we give a consensus vote here on the dais, and perhaps that's not a bad way to continue to do it, right? At least we'll get a chance to see the resumes, if you will, of those interested parties to fill that vacancy. So perhaps I could be convinced to not include Part 2 as part of the official wording of the charter.
Councilmember Berman.
I can address the Part 1. Really the number one issue I have with Part 1 is that's how, I was appointed in that time frame, right? Because I filled a vacancy of somebody who was appointed who chose not to run. I mean, the fact of the matter is if someone isn't going to put the time and energy into campaign, and they were just an appointed position to begin with, why should that not happen again in the future, right? So I was appointed at the first meeting after the November election to fill those 2 months. And it worked fine in those circumstances. Now, I would agree that in most circumstances, it probably makes sense, like for Councilman Sharp. He was appointed and then he ran. So in his circumstances, it made perfect sense to appoint him to fill those remaining 4 meetings. And yes, he had to sit out for 20 minutes to get reappointed. But, I mean, it's not like we were trying to be a jerk and appoint somebody else for the remaining 2 months and then let him come back in January. I mean, we recognize that he won. And it's basically the same thing like I feel like it happened to me, right? I ran for a spot for someone who wasn't running, who was just appointed, so that vacancy existed immediately. And with the facts and circumstances surrounding myself, it made more sense to appoint me 2 months early than it did to let someone who was appointed who didn't want to run stay for another 2 months. So I don't see why the flexibility in this is a problem, and more importantly, why it needs to be changed now, because sometimes it makes sense to go in a different direction like you did the year for me versus what we've done years for other people.
Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. So if we stay with the way it is, and it's supposedly a majority of the remaining council, there is a risk. When I say risk, it's pretty high risk because it's happened where the council split 3-3, and then nobody gets voted in, and we go without until the next regular election. However, if we have some type of application and vetting process that's transparent and open to the public, there may be an opportunity to influence 1 or 2 of those other council members to maybe change how they might have voted if they hadn't had that transparency and a list of, well, let me finish. So then it's not 3-3, it's 4-2, and we don't have to just stay open with nobody filling the seat. until the next election.
No, it's not to the next election, it's just to the next meeting.
No.
So we're
I'm sorry, I'm talking
About
11-2, part two. Part two.
But he's right about part 2.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
3-3, you go 3-3, if we go 3-3, 3-3, 3-3, 3-3, 3-3, just because three of the council members don't like who the mayor's appointed, which has happened within the last 5 years.
But it was the
It's-
next.
it's- So when I say it's rare, it's not rare, it's risk, it's a high risk. It's happened.
But the
I'm
next.
not just making this up.
At the next meeting, the mayor proposed someone different, and that passed. So it's not like we stayed without a council member for an entire year. It was the council exercised their opinion to not appoint who the mayor was recommending. So the mayor went, I mean, Craig, I wasn't here at the time, but my understanding is the mayor then went back to the drawing board, proposed a different individual, and that following meeting, that individual was appointed, correct?
Yep. Yep.
So it's not like, that's what the council has the power now.
I hear you, but my point is you still could go 3-3 and have nobody for X amount of time. Maybe just one meeting, maybe more than one meeting, I don't know. Possibility there.
Councilmember Gatchel?
Thank you. Regarding part 1, I understand the case of you being appointed and replacing former councilmember Leader, I believe it was. A part of the thought process of having that continuity, though, is for city business continuity. Like, if we had someone joining, removing yourself from the equation, if we had someone that decided to run and they hadn't really been paying attention or coming to the meetings, and then we're expecting them to want to be appointed for whatever reason because they were in a similar situation to you, they want to be appointed, they want to vote immediately on things. Number one, it would take council to agree to appoint that person, and it might be somebody that a future council really doesn't like and doesn't think has the best interest of the city. So it creates conflict there if that council decides we're not going to appoint you in the interim because we don't think you're a benefit to the city. A part of it is the continuity of business. I mean, we have plenty of old business where there's things that come up as new business that we've been dealing with for a while. And by keeping the appointed person on for the extra three or four meetings it is, you don't have that lag time of someone trying to relearn everything. They can be at the meetings and learn what's going on, but then you don't have an issue. In my mind, you have the experienced person up here who knows that, you know, that was a part of the budget discussions because they were here during the budget discussions, what have you. It's a little bit cleaner, in my sense, just to have the appointment go until everyone else's seat changes. Regarding part 2, in one instance, it did turn out to be a meeting or two, but it was really ugly, and it made the city look really bad in the interim. And that's why I think that, again, whether it's charter, my preference, or rules and procedures, it does need to get worked out, that this is how this will be handled, at least while we're all on council together. As the deputy mayor said, with our boards, people apply right now, we don't always see those applications. By having an application process, we're all seeing who applies, whether we think they would benefit the city or not benefit the city. I couldn't tell you who has applied to be on planning commission because the mayor gets those and decides those are by mayoral appointment. So I think we can say it would go, in the last instance, the mayor went back to the drawing board. It really was being on the opposing side of what he wanted. It really wasn't the drawing board so much as another week and a half of being yelled at and trying to be strong-armed into re-voting, because I believe we did end up voting a second time on Mr. Grassi. And it was really a bad look for the city. So we can vote on these independently, which was the goal, but one way or the other, part 2 passes to go into the charter language or doesn't pass tonight, that is something that needs to be addressed one way or the other. That way, we don't have that ugliness, because it can get extremely ugly. It makes us look unprofessional, and it's a detriment to the city. No one wants to do business with a bunch of people who look like they're unstable, and you don't know if your development's gonna get accepted or not. So that, I think, unless anyone has any other comments, I'll make a motion. Okay, Kevin?
Yeah,
Councilmember Smiley.
maybe you're about to say this, sorry, but it sounds like putting it on the charter, we're not in agreement with that. But there's seems to be some interest and some common ground with having it, some sort of formalized process created. So that's something we can do at another time. We're not gonna try to pound that out right now, right?
If part 2 fails.
Assuming it failed, and I think it will based on my keeping track here of who's liked it, not liked
Have
it.
a little hope.
Okay, well then, but if it does fail, then we'll discuss it further another time, right?
Hopefully.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Just a final comment regarding part 1, and I went back through and glanced at our agendas for the last 4 meetings for the last 2 years. There were very important elements, so I think the continuity of business is an important element of it, and that's why I'm in favor of at least getting part 1 onto the charter changes here.
So regarding part 2.
Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding part 2, is a division. Maybe it's worth just spending a little money, getting to see what the legal opinion might be, and then deciding maybe is it better to make it a rule or a charter amendment. And go a little further rather than us just guessing what a charter amendment would look like. I don't even know what it would look like. I just know I'd like to see some legalese behind it rather than us just guessing what it might look like at the end of the day.
Councilmember Gatchel.
Thank you. Along those lines, whether we approve that, maybe that part 2 gets tabled tonight until we have a full 7 on council, because if it does, if we do tie at 3-3, we are missing another council member. So, I mean, if we can all agree to table part 2 then until Councilmember Garland Fox is with us, then maybe that breaks the deadlock if there's a deadlock. But for now, I'd like to make a motion to direct city administration to draft a ballot language to amend the pronoun usage within the city charter to use plurals and more inclusive language rather than the solely masculine pronouns currently used.
Support.
All right, I got a motion and a support. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, pronouns carries. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to direct city administration to draft ballot language amending section 4.11.e to address the term length of appointees council, to eliminate the November post-election gap and instead make the duration of their appointment term coincide with the January 1 transition date of the other elected council seats.
Support.
All right, I got a motion and support to vote on section 4.11.e, part 1. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, first part carries.
Do we want to table this, part 2, or do we want to vote and bring it back if it ties?
It's your thing.
We'll vote, and then we'll bring it back if we need to.
So we understand where people are at.
Wait a minute, if we do that, I won't support bringing it back, because we've had this discussion 6 months ago
Well, then,
on something I wanted to bring back, and it didn't come back, and so now I don't want it to come back.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion to direct city administration to amend or create ballot language amending 611B of the charter to amend language to allow for fee-basis payments in limited instances, such as when external parties handle the role of a charter officer position, by way of example, city attorney and city assessor currently.
all right, I have a motion. Oh,
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve section 6.11.b language. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Berman?
I'd like to make a motion to deny moving Part 2 forward. I see no reason for us to table it. We have to be able to do business when people are absent.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I don't have a second. Motion dies.
There.
Good there. Thank you.
So we're going to discuss part 2 another time. Not tabling, it doesn't have to be tabled.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be tabled.
It's just
And the-
no
yep.
discussion.
Yep.
That's fine.
Yep. All right, and that concludes the unfinished business portion of our meeting. We move on to the new business portion. New business number 1 is a recommendation to approve the contract with Trivium Racing Incorporated for timing services associated with the Downtown Development Authority's Wixom Derby Day event to be held on May 6, 2023, with cost charged to Derby Day account number 248-729-956.008, and authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the contract on behalf of the city. Do I have a motion?
Support?
All right, this is just a fairly routine, we have the executive director of the DDA, Laura Cloutier, here, and Russ Meredith, the chairman of the DDA.
Good evening. This is a pretty standard contract. We have used Trivium Racing for the past 5 Derby Day events. The contract doesn't change much from year to year except the date and the price going up a little bit. I think it's gone up by $100 from last year to this year. So.
Yes. Yep,
Yep.
fairly standard. We've used them, like we said, for the past 5 years, and they've done a great job for us. Do we have any questions? Councilmember Smiley.
Thank you, Mary Beagle. Hello, Ms. Cloutier.
Hello.
I'm supportive of this. I'm not, this is a question more about the event. I'm curious. Said that our numbers were up a bit last year, but that was in 2022, but that was compared to the previous year, which is kind of a COVID year. I'm wondering if our numbers last year were more pre-COVID.
They were closer to pre-COVID than
Closer or close?
They were closer
Oh.
to pre-COVID.
This is no indictment on the event.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
No,
I'm just wondering if people are coming back out, you know.
They are. They are.
Obviously, more of an uptick this year.
They are. In 2021, we did not allow day of registrations
Oh, okay.
because we were still in, more of the height of COVID. So we were trying to keep that contact at a minimum. So we saw an increase of day of registrations. I think people are still, I think it's important to keep the day of registrations because I think people decide that morning how they're feeling and if they're going to come out.
The weather.
And check the weather and all those things that go along with that.
Very good. That's all I had. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, very good. I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to approve the contract with Trivium Racing Incorporated for timing services associated with the Downtown Development Authority's Wixom Derby Day event to be held May 6, 2023, with cost charged to Derby Day account number 248-729-956.008, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the contract on behalf of the city. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Laura and Russ. New business number 2 is a recommendation to approve the agreement for the local fiscal recovery fund distribution between Oakland County and the city of Wixom for $200,000. Funds to be received in county grants, account number 411-000-581.010, and authorize the mayor to sign the contract on behalf of the city. Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Support.
Thank you.
Before
Ms.
you
McGee.
tonight- Hi, good evening. Before you tonight is an agreement between Oakland County and the City of Wixom. As you can see in the report, Oakland County Board of Commissioners authorized the use of American Rescue Plan funding for grants for local government infrastructure. The purpose of this funding is to provide matching grants for local governments to assist in their senior centers with improvements for capital, technology, infrastructure, and equipment. And noted in there, we did apply for the grant in December. We received notification in January that we did receive the $200,000 grant. And we will be using the community center and facility capital plan as our matching portion.
Good. Do we have any questions? Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Just a comment, I would like to thank our former Oakland County Commissioner Phil Weipert for the heads up on this, and thank to Ms. McGee, and I think Tim helped in scrambling to get that grant application in, and it's great to see it approved.
Anybody else? All righty. Thank you, Ms. McGee. I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to approve the agreement for local fiscal recovery fund distribution between Oakland County and the City of Wixom for $200,000 and funds to be received in county grants account number 411-000-581.010 and authorize the mayor to sign the contract on behalf of the city. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. New business number 3 is a recommendation to approve the purchase agreement for 121 North Wixom Road, parcel identification number 96-17-31-477-009 from the Edna P. Roth Trust for $323,000 plus closing costs for the purpose of future development opportunities, and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. Motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Benson.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. You may recall that City Administration had requested City Council meet in closed session a while back, I believe late fall, to discuss potential property acquisitions. This property, 121 North Wixom, as well as another item that we'll discuss tonight, were 2 properties that we discussed. At that time, we had initial conversations with the property owners of their interest in selling it so that the city could potentially acquire more property to go along with the, I believe, 5 or 6 other parcels that we already own along that section of North Wixom Road, just north of Pontiac Trail. At that time, we had mentioned, what kind of their asking prices were. We took that feedback of, whether you all were interested in kind of this larger project, as well as potentially what costs you may be interested in, or I guess more interested in. We took that back, and over the last few months have been negotiating, looking at existing lease agreements for this freestanding structure, and we're able to come to this agreement that is before you all tonight. Kind of the long story short here is that there is an existing tenant, AFP Sound, within 121 North Wixom. This agreement would call for, after closing, for 150 days minimum to vacate the premise for that tenant. They're on a current month-to-month lease with 30 days notice from the city. We felt that that was a reasonable and appropriate amount to help them relocate, as well as for the city to evaluate its kind of larger plan for all of these properties. We're in no rush to take those next steps. I will. The one other thing I will add is that there are a variety of kind of contingencies within this purchase agreement. One of which being that we have the right to complete an environmental assessment and any other due diligence prior to closing. We do anticipate having a phase 1 environmental assessment and may go to phase 2 if necessary. We don't think that there's significant contamination, likely just an older structure. With that, we recommend this agreement, and per section 12.1 of the city charter, approval of this purchase agreement will require approval of 5 or more members of City Council. If you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Councilmember Gatchel.
Thank you. I did just want to clarify, you said 150 days at a minimum. The report says 150, up to 150 days from our 30-day notice. So I just wanted, it's from when we give a notice, they have 150 days. It's not at least 150 days.
Yeah, they have up to 150 days from closing. So they could leave early if they were so inclined.
Yeah.
But if we were to come up on that 150 days and they're still there, at 120 days, we would send them a 30-day notice to remind them of the circumstances. We have actually had conversations with that tenant, so they are they're familiar with this whole conversation. We haven't worked out a new location or anything yet. That would kind of be a next step on our side, assuming this was approved.
So is it our intention to give them their 30-day notice at like the day after closing or the day of closing?
We certainly could. I mean, we'll be in contact with them. I guess when we were going through this, and I'll offer Steve the opportunity to contribute to this as well, but I think the feeling was that the formal 30-day notice would come at day 120, with the understanding that they're looking for a new location, and if they have not found that, we would, I guess, remind them, and that would be the formal notice of you have 30 more days, or we can begin eviction proceedings. The other thing I will say is that depending on what the process looks like for how we go the next steps of all of these properties, as we'll discuss in an even later agenda item tonight, they may be amenable to staying a little longer. We might not be in any rush for them to leave sooner. So this agreement, I guess, gives us flexibility, but also locks in at least a minimum amount of time that those tenants would have to kind of figure out their next steps, if that makes sense.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that, because I don't want to be in a case where we wait to the day 120 and give them 30 days notice and they say now we have 150 days, because obviously that drags things out. But like you said, it's not like we're gonna be shovel ready in a few months anyway, so we're gonna be landlords for a bit. Have we I mean, I don't know what our insurance policy is, but the only thing that came to mind was, do we have to update insurance with our insurance provider since we're purchasing a few new properties potentially?
That's a great question. We have not engaged that conversation yet. We likely would after getting these purchase agreements signed. At a minimum, it wouldn't be a bad idea to let them know. Considering they would become city facilities, we'd have to review the policy, but I imagine we'd have some level of coverage in our existing.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, since we're becoming landlords, that if we do our landlord duties, like make sure we still have structure insurance on those, and that if I was talking to Councilmember Sharp before the meeting, if a light bulb goes out and they call their landlord, that DPW knows they have to run over there and change the light bulb for them, something like that. So hopefully we don't get bothered with that kind of stuff. But all right, those were the only things that came to mind. Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, make a clarification there. The intent on page 5A is to basically allow for 180 days, right? So it's after 150 days, we can give notice, and they have 30 days from that notice to vacate the property. They originally wanted up to 180 days, and we didn't want it to become 210 days, so we put it at 150 days for the primary term to expire, and then within 30 days of notice to vacate the premises, they have to be off. So 180 total.
And I apologize for my misunderstanding on that one.
Yeah, that got kind of complicated for a little while there. So.
Councilmember Behrman?
Thank you. Thank you to the city administration for getting us proposals on both of these pieces of property. I'm excited to see both of these moving forward. The only thing I would note is reading ahead to the next piece of new business, I did note that the lease does run through the end of January next year. And, I assume we're not going to be doing anything with the one building next to it until, or we do something with all the buildings, so potentially just letting the long-term month-to-month tenants at this property that we're discussing currently stay until January 31st would make just logical sense, so it's not just a vacant structure sitting for 6 months as well.
So if I can answer that briefly, I hope. The idea on the second piece of property, which is new business number 4, you're correct. The term currently expires January 30th of 2024, or January 31st of 2024. But we're going to be talking with the existing tenant about possibly vacating the property earlier than that. So that's why we wanted to have the 180 in this particular one, in case we're successful.
Well, then I'll keep my opinion to the purchasing of the property, which is you're asking this evening, and I am in support of moving forward. And I'll leave, when you evict people, up to the people. They way better than we are.
We'll never evict anybody on that one. It's just whether we can come to a mutual agreement for an earlier vacation.
Fair enough.
Councilmember Sharp?
Thank you, Mayor. When I first read the packet, I was interpreting the second bullet point of city, as it reads, the city completing due diligence at our own cost prior to closing, including environmental assessments. In my mind, I was thinking we're kind of buying it as is and we'll do whatever we want afterwards. But that's not what I heard. We're going to have an inspection, or I gotta think there's a couple things wrong with those buildings. Who's going to decide whether we still buy them or not?
So we, specifically for 121, we have already actually done an internal inspection with our building department staff
Okay.
and building officials. So structurally, we've looked at them. The environmental assessment really is, it's more of a protection against unforeseen things. So as an example, a phase 1 environmental assessment would do the research to find out, oh, hey, there's a gas tank underground, and now you're liable for this large brownfield that you didn't know existed. So that's really what that's kind of covering more, is the things under the ground that you can't see, or they would do also looking at the structure itself to say, hey, is there asbestos in the ceiling, or how that might need to be handled.
So there's some opportunity after the inspection and the environmental assessments to potentially, if there's problems, to renegotiate the amount, have them remediate, or we remediate,
Or back out.
take it off, or back out. Okay. And who makes that decision on whether we back out or not? Is that
Administration?
I would say administration.
Well, jumping in, the parties to the agreement would be the ones that did it. So we're directing the mayor and city manager, city clerk to sign it on our behalf as council. Really, it should be something that we discuss. It would probably be something that would be in closed session, since it's real property discussions. But that's, to my mind, how it would go.
It'll be an easy decision if it's
Yeah,
that
I
kind of
mean,
decision.
the point of the due diligence more so, I mean, I don't think our intent, based on what I've heard, is to keep those structures up. It's more so, like the assistant city manager said, with the environmental, if we're gonna go convey this to a developer, like is further down in a new business, that's a part of the marketing too. They wanna make sure that we can convey something that isn't going to have a ton of cleanup that needs to be done, something like that. So it's something realistically we would be doing one way or the other. The inspection isn't, I mean, we're not gonna keep them, so.
well, except we have to keep one of them for a while. We have renters.
Ultimately though, like once everything's vacated, I don't think the game plan is to leave those the way they are, so. To me, the due diligence is more environmental studies rather than, hey, the roof is leaking, because really, I don't think we care much.
Deputy Mayor Resnick?
And maybe one other clarification too. If phase 1 is conducted and the phase 2 core sampling finds, let's just say some herbicide or whatever, the BEA that gets filed with the state protects us in the future, right, for that particular substance. So that's why we would do the phase 1 and the phase 2 and file a BEA on base environmental assessment then to protect us against future liability for that.
Future liability, future liability, but maybe it has no value if it's really bad too.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah.
Go back and we should work away.
Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to approve the purchase agreement for 121 North Wixom Road, parcel identification number 96-17-31-447-009 from the Edna P. Ropp Fund Trust for $323,000 plus closing costs for the purpose of future development opportunities and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business number 4 is a recommendation to approve a purchase agreement for 117 and 119 North Wixom Road, parcel identification numbers 96-17-31-477-006 from North Wixom Properties LLC for $200,000 plus all closing costs for the purpose of future development opportunities, and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement.
Support?
Very good. Mr. Benson?
Well, it sounds like we've covered a little bit of this. I won't dive into all the kind of nuts and bolts, but suffice to say, similar arrangement, different price, different size property. 117 and 119 North Wixom are technically one piece of property, but they have 2 separate addresses. With those 2 separate addresses comes a little bit more complicated of a tenant situation. In this case, each tenant has a signed kind of official lease with different end dates. The commercial lease for 119 North Wixom is set to expire on April 30th, 2023. We don't, there shouldn't be any kind of additional concerns with that. We do have the option to allow that tenant to continue to, on a month-to-month basis, while we, figure things out and work with them, but we're not obligated to renew that lease. For 119 North Wixom, which is the house behind the commercial structure, as already noted, that lease runs until January 31st, 2024. We have not had the opportunity to engage directly with the residential tenants yet. Kind of as a part of the negotiation process is that we would be authorized to contact the tenants after the purchase agreement is signed and while we're in the due diligence period. We do anticipate kind of negotiating, as Mr. Brown mentioned, an early termination or some sort of kind of agreeable situation. With that in mind, if there are any other questions about this, we would also be doing an environmental assessment for this property as well.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Maybe just comment that, the land acquisition fund established by councils much prior to us was established for this purpose, to allow the city to go and acquire these properties for development and the betterment of our city. So these are great uses of this land acquisition fund.
Councilmember Gatchel?
Actually, sorry, never mind. I cleared up my own answer that came up earlier, so thank you.
Very good. All right, seeing no further questions, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to approve a purchase agreement for 117 and 119 North Wixom Road, parcel identification number 96-17-31-447-006 from North Wixom Properties LLC for $200,000 plus all closing costs for the purpose of future development opportunities, and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I don't have recommendation to approve the proposal for design and marketing services for the Reston redevelopment area from Carlisle Workman Associates of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and approve the associated downtown development authority budget amendment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Very good. Mr. Benson?
Thank you, Mayor. With all of those previous land purchases, taken care of, now we can get into the kind of the purpose of all of these land acquisitions. As discussed previously with City Council, and we also discussed this at last year's joint meeting, there is an interest in the city taking on I'll say a more active role in facilitating downtown development. We've had vacant properties that have sat in private hands for a while, and we have not been successful in convincing them to work with those. So as a part of the Airline Trail development process that took place last year, we acquired some properties. We already own some others, and assuming these purchase agreements go through, we will now own the entire section from Pontiac Trail to along North Wixom Road up to the school property, and in fact, a half acre in front of the school property. To help us kind of put this all together and put our collective developer hats on as we try to find a developer to work with us and kind of market this property to, city management and working with the Downtown Development Authority, we've been evaluating processes for putting that out there. You know, it could be as simple as hiring a real estate agent to market the acreage, or we could take an even more proactive approach and actually do some pre-planning, do some pre-development work, with our various boards and commissions, working with the DDA and City Council Planning Commission to kind of put a vision out there for what we would like to see on the site, as well as running some of those the market data to help make the case for what the community would like to see on this area. In total, we're looking at a developable area, probably a little shy of 3 acres. And in our village center area, that can go quite a ways and really be an impactful project. So city management, along with DDA staff, we went out and we got a couple different proposals for these design and kind of marketing services, 2 of which were from firms that had worked with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation as part of kind of their services for redevelopment ready certified communities, which will be there soon. The third is from our own planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates, who also offers a similar version of this service as outlined in the proposal that's included in your agenda packet. City management went through and kind of evaluated those, took those proposals to the DDA's Economic Vitality Committee to kind of help look at and parse through which recommendation to pursue. Part of the reason we chose to go through the DDA is City Council had expressed really a hope and an expectation of partnership for redeveloping these properties, working with the DDA, given that they are within the district. This expenditure also would be an allowable use under the current DDA plan, and given that this will impact them the most, we thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of bring everyone together. So the DDA's Economic Vitality Committee met, reviewed the 3 proposals, and ultimately recommended to the full DDA board to proceed with Carlisle Wortman Associates' proposal, which had their estimate was not to exceed $15,000 for these services over 4 to 5 months. The steps that they propose are also outlined in their proposal. When we took that to the DDA board, we also recommended allocating an additional $5,000 for any additional services that may be needed during the packaging process. As an example, we may need our engineers to do surveying work. We may need specific types of assessments. We may need to, purchase certain types of marketing opportunities or things like that. So we wanted to give ourselves some room to work with that. The DDA approved the recommendation to proceed with the Carlisle Wortman Associates, and they also approved a budget amendment to pay for this project. It was not originally budgeted for them, although they had the money available. So they would move, they recommended to move $20,000 from their business development grants line item to the special studies and services line item, and to cover the cost of this service. So given that DDA's budget is approved by City Council, a budget amendment will also be approved by you all. With that, we also have Mr. Dick Carlisle from Carlisle Wortman Associates, who would be serving as the project lead. He's a wealth of information and experience on this particular topic, and I would welcome him up if he has any additional comments about the process that we're proposing to kind of move through.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Richard Carlisle. First of all, let me say that we're extremely pleased to be working with Wixom as your planning consultants, and it's not new territory for me because I've actually done work for Wixom in the past on a lot of quite a bit of expert testimony on your behalf, working with Carol Rosati's office. So this is not unfamiliar territory for us. But just briefly, I think you really provided an excellent overview of the process. There's essentially a couple different ways you can sell property. You can essentially put it out there, hire a realtor and simply sell it a conventional way. Take your chances, get the price, and hopefully get the price that you're asking for, and then accept essentially what is being proposed there if it's, within the confines of your zoning ordinance. Or you can do a more strategic approach, which is what we're suggesting here, where you actually, create a vision for what you would like to see, how you would like to see the property develop. And then, based on that, through participation between council, the DEA, planning commission, essentially market the property to developers that we share that vision. Ultimately, we would develop a document for you that would look something similar to this, like a marketing piece, basically, an advertising piece, not only of this site, but of the community as a whole, to a list of developers that will develop over time who've either had experience in Wixom or we know have experience in projects like this that come out of the vision, and attempt to try to find a development company that most is the best match to meet your objectives for that piece of property. When you're doing strategic property acquisition like you are, I think the latter approach is the better way, because I know that selling property at a price, for example, is important, but what should be most important is how the property develops and how it contributes to your overall objectives. And you may gain far more out of that than just a mere sales price. So this is how we advise communities that are looking at strategic acquisition and attempting to assemble properties, which is what you're doing here. It's essentially put a plan together, put some images together. We have some really great talent in our company to do three-dimensional imaging that will give all of you a fairly good picture of what the dream could be, what the alternatives could be, and then go out there and try to sell it to a good, viable development company. One of the expenses will be, ultimately at the end, we'll have to be working with your city attorney's office to develop purchase agreements and things of that nature. So there will be some additional expense beyond ours. But ultimately, the idea behind this is to allow the city to be the driver of how the property develops.
Do you have any questions? Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Let me just comment, I'm in favor of this process. And, looking at the Seaver Farm development example that you used, and this is a great example of it, where renderings and a true vision propel this forward rather than just listing it. We've seen a number of our properties, even with some of our private owners that have stalled for 5, 10, 20, 25 years without a vision, so I'm in favor of this.
Councilmember Gatchell.
Thank you. Two things. The first shorter thing being, looking through the plan, there was a comment about working with the Planning Commission and then possibly discussing with council. Maybe, I don't like adding extra meetings, but if we could have a joint meeting, to me, so we can all brainstorm in the same room together rather than definitely planning, maybe council. We're the ones kind of driving this whole thing, so I'd like to have a more formal opportunity to give some input on what we would like. Longer term thing, and I've kind of mentioned it before, in general, is I think before we put out requests for proposals, we need to work with either our attorney or a real estate specialized attorney to figure out a way that developers understand they're essentially getting the rights to develop the property, and that if they don't meet the deadline everyone's agreed upon, then that property is city property again with all the improvements that have been made. That way we can avoid the issues we're having, because nothing like that clawback was put into it. I mean, when we give out industrial incentives, we have clawbacks if they don't meet jobs requirements. We very much so need to do the same thing with this, where if we don't have nice buildings up by this date, then you're done and we're moving on to the next person. I don't know exactly how the attorney would work that out, but I think that is important to put out in the rules for the RFQ. That way developers know that it's not going to be a buy and hold and we'll get to it when we get to it situation. We're looking for buildings up very quickly. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to approve the proposal for design and marketing services for the Renton redevelopment area from Carlisle Wortman Associates of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and approve the associated Downtown Development Authority budget amendment. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Very much.
All right. Moving on to new business number 6 is Wage and Salary Committee recommendation to increase the city manager's annual salary to $123,600 retroactive to July 1st, 2022, and increase the city clerk's annual salary to $83,430 retroactive to July 1st, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Thank you. The Wage and Salary Committee met on January 24th to consider these proposed pay raises. It's in our packet. It's in accordance with the wage and salary policy guidelines, and it also is in line with the. It's consistent with the previously negotiated collective bargaining agreements, and even with these 3% raises, these wages still fall within the guidelines of the salary restrictions. So with that, do we have any questions? Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I support the 3% annual increase for city manager and the city clerk based on outstanding performance that we've all discussed over the last year. My concern, though, is the retroactive aspect of it. And I think in this case, I'll support it, but I'm hoping in 2023 and 2024 years we can do better in getting them closer to the effective point. I know for a fact that I spoke to one of the members of the Wage and Salary Committee who's not here tonight, so you can probably figure out who it is. She is opposed to retroactive pay, but recognize in this case everybody got one, so I'm not sure why we can't get it aligned closer to the rest of the staff. All I'm saying is I hope we can improve going forward. Thank you.
Very good. We'll do our best. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the Wage and Salary Committee's recommendation to increase the city manager's annual salary to $123,600 retroactive to July 1, 2022, and increase the city clerk's annual salary to $83,430 retroactive to July 1st, 2022. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and that concludes the new business portion of tonight's meeting. We move on to the call to the public, the second call to the public. I will not read the rules again, but all I'll say is with the rules of the public, this time you can speak your mind and whatever you'd like to talk about. Do we have anybody for the second call to the public? Seeing none, I'll close the second call to the public and move on to city manager comments. City Manager Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. The city manager update has a variety of things in it here. The DPW has content on a couple of different things. First off, Jody Gallo, the secretary to Tim Sigma, as well as other DPW staff, received a nice thank you letter from the Lakes Area Youth Assistance for their participation with helping a needy child from the Walled Lake Consolidated School District during the Christmas holiday season. Also, the DPW folks who clear our roads received lots of kudos from people for the very few snow events that we've had this winter time. It's been a kind of an odd winter. But each time that it's happened, we've received thank yous from people, including things like you're always on top of it, the roads were clear, we thank you. Thank you for keeping many main roads and subdivision streets plowed in such a timely fashion. We've lived in the city for over 43 years and have always been impressed with your department and the service that you provide. Keep up the good work, and thanks. So we get a lot of that from folks about the efforts of the DPW on the snow removal. We wanted to make sure we highlighted that because that's something that we all take pride in, I think, at the city in terms of that. And people that take advantage of it are appreciative of it, that's for sure, that the roads are cleared as quickly as they are. So we wanted to make sure to get a good thank you and congratulations for the great work out to the DPW staff that are responsible for doing that. The other item under DPW talks about the Maple Road Mill and Overlay request for proposal has been placed through the Michigan Intergovernmental Trade Network, or MITN, on February 7th, and bids are due March 1st of 2023. Then the Road Commission of Oakland County Mill and Overlay of Grand River, beginning in Lyon Township and running to just west of Wixom Road, is set to proceed in the summer of 2023. It's only going to address blacktop. The intersection of Wixom Road and Grand River there is in concrete, so that's where the process will stop. And because of that, they're not addressing the second turn lane in that system either, or that process either, because of the fact they're not getting into the actual intersection itself, and plus there's a lot more work to be done there in terms of right-of-way acquisition and things of that sort. But we're looking forward to both of those road projects being taken care of in this upcoming season. Then the next thing, fire department, I wanted to talk about the fact that, just point out some obvious things that are happening in relation to the budget. We've got a couple of different line items in the fire department budget that are over budget, and that's because of the outstanding and what I'll call unprecedented success that we've had in recruiting additional paid on-call and auxiliary firefighters into the fire department. And that's a great problem to have, and I don't mind taking care of budget adjustments to address those kind of things. So I wanted to say publicly thank you to newly appointed, no longer interim Fire Chief Brad Giesler for his outstanding work in leading the efforts there, as well as the efforts of all the staff at the fire department have been very critical to that, reaching out to people in the business and talking about the changes that have happened in the fire department in the city of Wixom and how things are going in a great direction, those sort of things. It's led to a lot of great success. Many additional staff people already on hand in the fire department, and there's many more that are still in the pipeline that will be added shortly. So we've had a great deal of success, and I kind of wanted to use those PO processing. Okay, the budget, exceeding of the budget by a few dollars, I wanted to use that as a reason to point that out and say thank you to Fire Chief Giesler and all the staff at the fire department for all their great work in bringing new staff into the fire department, allowing us to cover shifts and improve the service levels in the city of Wixom. So that's all that I had other than the dates to remember, which there are many of them. If you have any questions on anything, I'm happy to address them.
And that's a great lead-in, because the budget meeting that we're going to have at 6 o'clock before the next council meeting is going to be about the fire department. So,
right.
Assistant City Manager Benson, do you have anything?
I do. Just one thing as a kind of an FYI, kind of a note of how things are coming together. The Planning Commission approved and recommended revisions to the Village Center area ordinance as well as the zoning map. It's been a long discussion, and actually would have been on this agenda, but we're finishing some new graphics that will be in that. So that'll be on your agenda on the 28th. And I mentioned that mostly to say there's been a lot of work and time and effort between all of our boards and commissions and the Downtown Development Authority, Planning Commission, everyone, as it relates to downtown projects, and they seem to be coming together in a way that really will be able to put out a vision and I think will be attractive. So I just wanted to point that out, that I believe that we're making great strides, and thank you to everyone that's helped bring that all together.
Council comments, Councilmember Smiley.
Thank you, Mayor Beagle. A few items. For my condolences to the family of Mary Stasser. Ms. Stasser recently resigned from the cemetery board after serving there for many years. Another condolence, I'm sorry to say, to the family and councilman of Keenan Gottschall on the passing of his grandmother, Barbara Boyle. Congratulations to Carolyn Shave, our public safety records manager, who recently retired from our police department. Now, in years past, I've had Caroline described to me as one of those people who does much more than her job title / description. And I'm not going to do her justice. I heard she was fantastic, and she did it all, and she did it all very well. I'm guessing she has big shoes to fill. So congrats on her retirement. And then congratulations to our new Fire Chief Brad Giesler. You've been the interim for a while, and just yesterday you were sworn in? Yeah. Wonderful. Sorry I missed that again. That's all I have. Thank you.
Good. Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, condolences to Councilmember Gottschall on the passing of his grandmother Barbara, who was a longtime City of Wixom volunteer as well. Also want to thank, congratulate new Fire Chief Brad Giesler, and I know the fire department's in good hands. We've been seeing a lot of really good communications and progress on something I know is very important to council, and that's improving the staffing and continuity of our fire department coverage. One thing I neglected to mention at the last meeting, I went to a Historical Society presentation on January 16th, and I wanted to thank Nancy Dingleday and her team at the Wixom Historical Society for not only that particular one about Route 66, which doesn't go through Wixom, but it was a really good presentation. But I was impressed by the passion that they had, and there were like 60 people at this thing. And so they really publicize it, and I didn't know what to expect, and I was really pleased with that type of program that we have in Wixom. I had never taken part in it before, and I encourage everyone to do something with the Historical Society or any of the other activities that we have. And the last thing I had a question for Assistant City Manager Benson. In the minutes for the DDA, you mentioned the Mariachi's liquor license still in process. Any thought how long does that take? Because I feel sorry for those guys. You know, they're probably anxious.
You mean El Camino?
Yeah, El Camino.
Oh, did I get the name wrong?
Yeah. Nobody.
They're good.
Yeah, I had to think what was
That's all right. I knew what you were talking about. I would say at this point,
fast enough to find the name.
It's. I would say we're not out of the usual length of time frame. My understanding is that the MLCC takes their sweet time. However, I do have an update insofar as the MLCC has been in contact with us. We're clarifying a little bit of information, and they're doing, their kind of background check. So it is proceeding. They're moving forward. It's the state bureaucracy.
Not out of the realm of standard timing or anything yet.
I would say they still should be on track to have, they'll be up and running well before concerts in the park.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Gacho.
Thank you. I wanted to share my congratulations with our new fire chief. The changes since he started, even on an interim basis, have been nice to see. Definitely speaking to staff, you can tell everyone's more energized. There's a higher morale. We have 24-hour coverage now, which had been something we'd been discussing for years, and he was able to get it done in a few months. So I wish you good luck as you continue to build on the foundation that has started to take shape. We also got a Novi looking for firefighters postcard in the mail today, so it was nice that we've kind of loaded the roster, and they're spending thousands mailing to everybody trying to get people, so good job on that. I also wanted to share my thanks on behalf of our family for everyone that shared their condolences and thoughts and stories about my grandmother. She was part of the board of review for a number of years. She was also just known around City Hall because my grandfather was a city inspector for the city for over 40 years. So it was nice to hear stories of everyone's interactions with her and everyone say how nice and well liked she was. Also wanted to thank the city for the donation to the scholarship and memorial of my cousin Bailey in lieu of flowers. It actually would have been Bailey's 21st birthday today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Behrman.
Thank you. I'll share in the comments that were already made with condolences. I would like to also congratulate our new fire chief. It was really exciting to see yesterday. It was how many of the members of the fire department came out for his swearing in. I don't even know we had that many members on the fire department, period, prior to him taking that role. So it was a full hallway out there to watch him get sworn in. So obviously they're behind you, so that must mean you're doing something right already. And then the only other thing I'd like to mention is the daddy-daughter dance. I had the pleasure of taking 3 of my girls to the daddy-daughter dance last Thursday night. wonderful event. All three of them had an awesome time. Thank you, Deanna, and your staff for that event again. They all enjoyed it, and it was really well put together.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Thank you, Mayor. You were competing with my son-in-law, and you had his three there, too.
Yeah, I know.
My grandchildren.
It's a bit funny.
Also, my condolences to the Gottschall family. I've had interactions with both Barbara and Bernie over the years, and in my early years in the city, and they'll be greatly missed. The congrats to Brad Kiesler. It's going to be hard for me to just say Kiesler the way it's spelled, but I know it's Kiesler, not Keisler. Seeing the young, smiling faces of a lot of the new recruits yesterday, that was really of note for me, and how many people I had to reintroduce myself to or introduce myself to because they just weren't familiar. So the recruiting efforts have been great. It's well deserved, and we were easy on you tonight because you've only been on the job for a day. We didn't call you up to the podium for any of the fire report questions. Also, just want to make a comment. I attended the public input sessions on the Road Commission of Oakland County, Grand River Rebuild, and I think it's terribly short-sighted on their behalf for not including that second left-hand turn lane. I don't know if anybody's shopped at Myers recently and tried to leave there. You get in quite a long line, and then 3 or 4 lights later, you may make it onto North Winscombe Road. When you look at the same intersection at Beck Road in Grand River, probably has half the volume, and they've got the 2 lanes. So I think it's terribly short-sighted. I've made those comments known at that public input session, but I know they won't be doing it in this construction cycle. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to send my condolences to the Gotcho family on the loss of his grandmother. And congratulations, Chief Giesler, on, I enjoyed the smiles on the older guys' faces too yesterday, not just the young guys, but it was nice. I said it a couple of times yesterday. It was nice to see smiles on the firemen's faces finally. So I think that's got a lot to say with your leadership, and I'm looking forward to working with you some more in the future. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you, everybody.